Greetings YouTube, welcome back campaigners. This is Campaign Terrain. I'm your host Cross, and I promised you in social media that this week I was going to teach you 9 different ways to texture the EVA foam. That wasn't true. I'm going to show you 18 ways to texture EVA foam. Be a list in the bottom of all those different techniques. While you're down there, there's going to be some links to help out the channel. So remember, like, share, subscribe, and hit those other links, and I would really appreciate it. Not only do I show you all of those, I've even got one I almost left out, but I didn't leave you hanging. I've got that. All this out of one material and a bunch of tools. And we're going to come up with all of these textures. And I'll show you how to do that right after the bump. Thanks for coming. Jump right in. 2 things real quick though. 1, wear this. You're going to need it every time you touch it with a hot tool or a power tool, and even some of the hand tools like the sanding. Wear this. So during a lot of this, you're just going to hear music while I craft some stuff. I'll try to speed up that video just so you can see what I'm doing. But wear your respirator, please. Second, a word about my sponsor for this. I don't have one. There's no sponsor for this. So if you see me using a particular tool or anything like that, just realize there are other brands. They may be cheaper, they may be more expensive. So I am not specifically suggesting you get any of the brand names that I use in this. Use whatever you want that comes close. I'm giving you a lot of options here. So plenty to work with. All right, let's jump into it. I'm using this type of fairly thin rolled up foam that comes with the diamond plate on the back. The only reason I'm using that is because I have a lot of it like right immediately ready to hand, and I can cut it into all these uniform little chunks. Let's talk about what you can do for texture without using any tools at all. None. Most of these foams, not all of them, but most of them only have a texture on one side, so you can use that smooth side. And you can leave it just like it is. Sometimes these are a little thirsty for paint, so if you paint them, you may have to do several coats. You can also heat treat them with the heat gun or the blowtorch, and they'll come up with a much glossier sheen to them, and you can work with it that way. So you can leave it just like it is. Now I'm using these rolled up diamond plate style that are a little bit thinner, but that's just to show you, so I have a bunch of uniform ones, so they all work, so we're all working from the same base, so you can see where we're going. But they have a pattern on the other side. That side on this one happens to be a diamond plate, like you'd have on a metal like truck bed line or something like that. So that you've got that option, or some of the play foams have a different option, which is this crosshatch, this sort of herringbone woven sort of texture, and you can put that either way. You can even play with having different parts textured and not. If you're using these play squares, some of them are going to have a hole in them depending on which letter or number it is, but some of them are not. So you can play around with the different forms where you can have a texture with the smooth, and you can take that and press that the way you need, and then you'll notice that this is effectively level across, but we've got 2 textures going on. So there's a lot of options there. The herringbones are also available in the square floor mats that fit together. Not the herringbone, excuse me, the diamond plate, as well as the crosshatch. So these are the same way. These are the work mats, and they have a smooth side and a textured side. Here are some simple hand tool textures you can do. One, I've used a fork. Now these tines happen to be pretty narrow, and if you use some that have like a wider point on them, then it's going to give you a different texture. But I'm going to show you how these work, and it's just a matter of sticking in and gouging. Now, if that's too uniform for you, you can use just one end, or you can pull in different directions. You can only use some of the tines at once. You can pull pieces free, or you could actually create a really symmetrical pattern just by lining them up if you want, and end up with a whole lined pattern or a whole gridded pattern. But you can simply pull across those, and you'll end up with a pretty good looking rock texture, especially once you start to pick some of these out. So I'm going to leave that one here. I'm going to do another one real quick, and one of these I'm going to leave, and one I'm going to add heat to in a bit. You'll see. So that was the fork texture. As you can see, that's going to give you a nice rough texture. You can make it more or less visible that it's a texture depending on how far you take it to the edges and what angles you go at. You don't just have to use a fork. You can also use sharp tools. Like one of these is a sculpting tool, and one of these is a nut pick for getting nuts out of the shell. Anything that's sharp and pointy, you can do the same thing. It's just the more points you have, the more uniformity you're going to have. But the less points you have, the more work it's going to be, because you're going to have to do a lot more scratching. Next thing you can do with sharp and pointy things is you can just stab all over. And you can, depending on what size you use and whether you twist it or go in at an angle, you can create a bunch of different textures. But it is a lot of work, but it will make a really good pockmark sort of look. So you can do that, but that is not my favorite. Knives. Now, I have Sean Counley. I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly. There will be a link to his channel up here in the top. But Sean put me wise to this one, and it seems to work magnificently. You're going to want a knife, and you're going to want it super duper sharp. It doesn't matter what you sharpen it with. I happen to use one of these kitchen ones, but you know, basic thing, super sharp. Now, you can get a different texture with some duller knives, but any dull knife is more dangerous. Plus, I just happen to have better results with the sharper knife, even though mine's a piece of junk falling apart. So, take the knife and keep your fingers out of the way. You're going to want to cut in at different angles, both the blade at different angles to the piece and the angles you cut at across the piece. So I'm going to speed this up and just hack through this a little bit with the blade, and then I'll show you how to actually get the great texture at the end. As you can see, I've cut a bunch of these in. This one is with this knife, and this one is with this knife, and I've cut both angled in at left and at right, and then as I've spun it, lots of pieces have come loose. And you just take those, you can put these in a save pile for rubble for later. In the meantime, you're going to end up with something that looks shaggy or shaly, and if you have extra pieces that are stuck on here, you can simply peel those off. Now, you can leave this piece like this, but you'll see me heat treat both of these in a moment. When I get to the heating tools, you'll see me use a blowtorch on both of these pieces. But as you can see, it makes a spectacular rock texture. You can also use it if you're using something a little thicker than this, where you can just do it in a localized area and you can make a really good crater from an explosive or magic going awry or meteor hitting or large cannons, whatever. You can also use just sanding tools like sandpaper or sanding stones and get some interesting textures, but it's a little bit harder because you have to curve the foam away from you generally, and you can scratch into it, but it depends on what type of grit you're using, but you can get some textures. I have seen this on a couple of cosplay channels where they've been building cosplay or LARP armor, and it seems to work, but as you see, this does not seem to work for me. I'm just showing you this is another option. Right, heated power tools. Everything you see here is going to put out fumes, so definitely want to wear your respirator. I'm going to be putting that on in just a minute, and I'm going to show you what I'm going through in order, and then I'm just going to do all of it at once. There'll be some music, and you'll see me using each of these. Okay, first off, I've got the aluminium and the iron, like you've seen me use in some other videos. So that's going to be a refresher course, but I'll show you that in a moment. I'm using, normally I would use a heat gun. Mine happens to be low or high temp, but I can't because Zane psychically broke it from hundreds of miles away. He really didn't. It's a joke we have. But go check out Zane's channel. Link up in the top. Instead of that, I'm going to be using a blowtorch, which I have here. And I have a couple of different styles. I've got this one. And I've got a way to stand it up so the hot tip doesn't hurt anything. By the way, this is just a paint cap. Here's a pro tip for you. If you use miniature paints, specifically the Games Workshop paints, they'll fit in this little hole so they don't tip over when you're painting. So there you go. I've also got this style lighter, which also works like a blowtorch. I've also got this style lighter, which doesn't. I've also got 2 different soldering irons. These are also like wood burners. This one is super cheap, so there's no steep entry level into it. This one's about $3 to $5. This one's a little more expensive. This one's not super expensive, but this one's adjustable, so you can set it anywhere up to like 600 and something degrees Celsius. So it's adjustable to different temperatures, so if you think it's melting too much or too little, you can use that. But meantime, all you really have to have is one of these cheapy $3 ones. Last, got some rocks, and what we're going to be doing is heating the foam and then pressing it onto the rock to get the shape of the rock into the foam. And I've got both some larger rocks and some smaller rocks that I'm going to spread across here. When I press onto those, it's going to leave little divots. For all of these, you're going to want to work on a surface that is not going to be melted. So you don't want to put any heat directly on like a cutting mat or a kitchen counter or something like that. So you want to work on something that can take the heat. Now the aluminium's pretty simple. I showed you this before. Take your aluminum foil and just put some crinkles in it. And I like to work with 2 layers, but you can with only 1 layer. 2 layers runs less risk of actually melting your foam. 1 layer can put a much more vibrant texture in it. So I'm going to go ahead and use it with the 2 layers because that's what I like. And just put the crinkle on there and then take the already heated iron and press it on there. But let me get my mask on real quick, because even this puts out fumes. That was the aluminum and iron. So that puts the sort of stony texture you've seen in my last 3 weeks builds. So you can go back and take a look at those and see what I'm talking about. But as you can see, there's a bit of a stony, creviced, mottled shape in there from the ironed on aluminum. Now we're going to work with the 2 hot irons. Now these can be soldering iron. These can be the ones that are designed for pyrography, which is a hard word for me to say, but it means wood burning. So you can use a wood burner or a soldering iron. I'm going to use the cheapy one first, and then I'll be using my little bit more expensive one. There's not much difference between when you're working with this foam, the $3 one and the $35 one. If you just have a steady hand and you have a plan to follow, or you just freehand it if you are just trying to make a generalized design, this becomes really simple and takes almost no time at all. Just make sure to wear the breather so you're safe, and definitely keep your hands out of the way and don't sit it on anything meltable or flammable. So this one I just freehanded. This is with the $3 one. This one I used the more expensive one and just followed the same pattern I had done before on this. And as you can see, they come out fairly comparable. And there's really nothing to it. 2 ways to use the torch tools, and that is direct heat and heat after you've carved the foam. So I'm going to show you both of those real quick. And then there's one tool that I forgot about, which is the hot wire knife style, and I'll show you that in just a second. So for direct heat, you can just simply take a lighter like one of these torch style, and you can either just simply seal the surface, which I don't know if you can see that, but it makes a sheen on it, and that's not putting out very good heat. This works the exact same way. It's just a flame, and you do not want to get this too close if you're just trying to seal it, and you just want to let the heat run over that. And as the heat wafts over it, it's going to seal all those pores. You'll see them go all glossy and shiny, and that makes it easier to paint. It closes off all the pores so it doesn't suck in all the paint. As you can see, it puts a different texture on it. So 2 more ways to use the heat directly like that. You can take it and get much closer, and you can actually burn little things in it. Now, this is where I'm going to need my mask. Let the fumes clear out for a few minutes. As you can see, this makes a deep trench in there, and it becomes very hard. It's almost like a plastic rather than a foam, and you can use that for just decor. You can use it for grooves in the ground if you need like a river or a sewer or a trench. You can use it to make rock faces. You can change the texture on the surface of the rock, etc. And that's if you actually just burn that surface. If you burn too much and it really starts to get away from you, you might as well start over. So you got to have a really delicate, practiced hand to do that. Definitely don't do it on your finished piece first. You want to practice on it. All right, now this is a really good example in this light where you can see the difference between where the heat's hit and giving you this nice sheen and where I haven't actually hit it with the heat and it's still open where the paint's going to soak in. You can spread your rocks out, your pebbles out, and then heat the foam. And you want to keep your finger out of the way, and you want to get this pretty well warmed up. You don't necessarily want to do the burn like on the other thing, but you do want to get this pretty warm. So you're going to need to expose that to quite a bit of heat. This will work better with a heat gun, but as I said, mine's busted. And once you've got it nice and warmed up, you want to take that and immediately press that onto the pebbles as hard as you can. Now it's only going to take a few seconds for that to cool down, but in that few seconds, it's going to leave this pockmarked texture that looks perfect for stony walls, especially like cave walls, something like that. You can also take some more of these gems after and glue those into the little divots that it makes. And if you say you have it a little bit curved and it's built under your thing, you can say that these are gems or ores that your miners are trying to look up, and you just glue these into those little holes. So you should be able to see that. You can see the texture of the holes from the pebbles. You can also do the exact same thing and press it on the stone, and it's going to give you the reverse of that stone carved in there. Depending on what kind of stone you use, that can be very dramatic or very subtle. I like this for flooring in caves because it leaves a definite texture and pattern on there, but it doesn't make it difficult for figures to stand on. So I like the stone for the floors and the pebbles for the walls, and together that makes a pretty good cave system. I have been working with foam for 20 years, with EVA foam for 20 plus years. I have used it in all sorts of different applications, and this still amazes me every time I see this. All you have to do is take your knife and cut in a pattern. On this one, I'm simply going to make a cross-shaped pattern on the foam. I'm going to freehand this, so I'm cutting 2 little tracks each direction. And you'll notice that you can barely see those. I have to sort of open it up to see them, but this part just amazes me. I'm going to try to get this as into the center of the camera as I can for you close up here. So I've got those little scratches in there. You don't want to cut all the way through, just a millimeter, maybe 2 into the foam. And then when you hit it with the heat, those ridges just open right up and become completely visible. Now this works great for all sorts of patterns and textures. You can create grooves in the floor, you can create lines in a roadway, you can create rooms that don't have to have walls, anything you want. Just hit it with the heat for a moment, and as you can see, those lines have opened right up. I kind of overdid it there, but as you can see, all of those opened up, and in the meantime, it's also, you see that sheen on its heat sealed and all that, so when you paint it, these lines will still be able to hold the paint because they are much more pronounced. As I've said in other videos, this is a fairly inexpensive tool. This one cost about, I don't know, maybe $15 retail, and I know that I've seen it on sale for as little as $9. I've seen it online for as little as $6. And this is USB powered. It plugs in, and then it's got a little on switch here. You can see this is completely cold, and within about 30 seconds it'll be hot enough to cut with. So all you have to do is turn it on, and then I'm going to skip ahead till it's hot. See you in just a sec. Okay, it's been about 1 minute. I've moved everything out of the way so it's not going to get hit, and I'm going to make basically the same cross pattern again, and then I'm going to show you 2 other patterns in one of these squares. So there you go. I cut the simple cross shape in it, and then I laid down some lines and put some pieces across it for brickwork texture. I've also created some that look like wooden floor planks for in your bar or tavern, inn, home, whatever. You can also create a wood grain. Now you might have to go over a second time to get the lines between the boards a little deeper, but as you can see, I've got knots in there and wood grain, and then I've also got a pockmark texture that looks sort of stony, where I just put some different divots in it. You could again use this for the one where if you're putting ores in your cavern, you could just make the holes bigger and glue the little rocks in. So there's smooth with just a design on it, brick, smooth wood, knotty wood, and a sort of pockmarked stone. So there's 5 textures right there with this tool, and that whole process took maybe 4 minutes to create this entire board. So you could do an entire tavern floor like 12 by 12 in 10-15 minutes and nothing to it. Last little snippet. I almost didn't include the Rotary Tool for several different reasons. It is a little bit more expensive, so it's a bit gatekeepery to say, oh, you're going to need this to text your phone, and you don't. This is just one of many tools you can use to make one of many textures. It also creates lots and lots of dust, so I actually used it out in a different area where it would have been hard to film. Definitely going to want to wear your respirator with this. No question. The dust gets everywhere. You do not want to be breathing it in. And the last one is, if you know how to use a Dremel tool or a Roto tool, then you already know how to use it. So there will be a still of a close-up of this, but as you can see, I've got 7 different bits I used here to make a bunch of different textures. And I'll have a picture of this at the end. But essentially, you're cutting lines and grooves. And like I said, if you already have one of these, or you know you're going to get one of these, great. There's no point in specifically getting it for this, but it does give you some other options. But most of these are capable of being made with other tools. So we'll have a still of this at the end. And so I'll see you right after the wrap up. See you in just a minute. There you have it, campaigners. I hope you've liked this one. One material, billion combinations. I'm really passionate about this stuff. I use it for cosplay, LARP, and role playing, and the occasional war game I play. I love EVA foam. There's a million things you can do with it. My little friend here and I have been super happy to bring this to you, and I hope you've enjoyed it. I know it's a little long. I apologize for that. So that's about it. We're going to wrap this up. This is Campaign Terrain. I'm your host, That Guy Cross. Remember, like, share, subscribe. Hit those other links if you want to help out the channel. I love you, and until next time, I wish you luck in your campaign.